Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us on this hot Friday in Colorado. We're going to talk some space, and I promise I won't do too many of the cheesy space jokes, because you're going to definitely want to hear more of what they have to say. My name is Kimberly Schwan, and I do communications for Sierra Nevada Corporation. I'm not an engineer. I call myself a word engineer. So my history is storytelling. I was a journalist in Washington, D.C., and I covered the White House, and it was crazy and fun and exciting, and everyone always asked me, why are you in space now? What excites you about space? And my answer is, this is the greatest story ever told. And as a veteran storyteller, I can't think of anything more exciting than the human innovation and creativity and the perseverance that it takes to go to space. And so we're here to talk about that today and what the Apollo program did to inspire all of the people on this stage and what they're doing to advance space exploration. Sierra Nevada Corporation is making the Dream Chaser spacecraft. There's actually a model over in the corner here at Wings Over the Rockies, and we're building that here in Colorado. We're also working on some missions for the moon and for Mars as part of the Gateway program, and all of our experts here on the stage are going to tell you more about that. But we're excited to be a partner both for Wings Over the Rockies and to tell you how Apollo inspired us and how that's going to lead to what we're doing today. We also have some really cool videos. I promise you the video that Steve's going to show you is going to have you on the edge of your seats, I promise you. And we're going to tell you more about what we're doing and how we're inspired by the Apollo program. So to kick us off, John Curry, who is a former NASA flight director and also working on our Dream Chaser program, is going to tell you more.
Thank you, Kimberly. So I'm going to start here just by the reason that we're here, I guess, is because 50 years ago tomorrow, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, and that's pretty doggone impressive feat to be done in 1969. So I just wanted to start with, why am I here in the first place, and how did I end up getting to be where I am today? 33 years of space flight experience I've been having. I started at NASA Johnson Space Center in 1987. But it all started with that picture, and I don't know if anybody's ever met Harrison Jack Schmitt, but 1969 was Apollo 11. There were 6 more flights that actually landed on the moon after that, so he was one of the last 2 astronauts. There's only been a total of 12 humans ever to set foot on the moon. I'm sure you guys know that, and the last 2 was Jack Schmitt and Gene Cernan, and so those 2 were the ones that set foot on there. But the reason that it ties back to me is I was born in 1965, and in 1972 I was a 7-year-old kid from New Mexico, which is where he's from. And so that picture, which I kind of like, you know, because it shows everything. It's got the flag planted on the moon and then a picture taken of planet Earth back in December 1972. And another piece of information for you, I think it's been too long since we've been on the moon, to be December 1972 since we've been there. So NASA's working their way towards that, and I just think it's important for you guys to remember there's a big reason why, you know, if your kids are interested in that kind of stuff, show them this picture. And this is where we're headed, again. But it's taken 50 years to get back to that point. And then this one's just, I think is a good, interesting picture that's to the right. And it's interesting for me because I'm actually in the picture. I was a very young kid back then in 1995, where we had the first docking of the space shuttle to the space station Mir. I don't even know how many people know that there was a space station Mir. It's not the one in space today. It was the one that the Russians made. There's 2. It was the one the Russians actually put in space in 1986. And this was the very first docking of the space shuttle to the Russian space station. So it was the 2 vehicles were never designed to go together. We made an agreement, governmental agreement, that says the U.S. and Russia are going to work together, and we are still working together, by the way, on the space station with them. And so that picture was taken during the docking of that mission. So you can see in the picture in the upper right, that's this picture of the space shuttle team taken from the Mir space station. But the reason it's got historical significance to the Apollo program is that's the Apollo mission control room. And so that was the very last picture, the very last mission that we flew out of that Apollo control room, at least in its old design. There's 2 mission control rooms that we had during the Apollo program, and this is one of the 2 that was there. So just sort of historical reference. This is me. I was a lot younger, a lot less wrinkles, just big picture. I'm a flight director. I don't know if anybody got to see, I think Gene Kranz came and talked recently. He was my boss when I started at NASA. And obviously he was the flight director, the lead flight director on Apollo 11. And if you ever want to see what tough and competent is all about, he instilled that in us way back in the day, and we still do that today. And we get a chance to listen to Steve. That's what the NASA has bred into me: tough, competent, morale, discipline, because this space flight is hard. And both Steve and I have lived through two, well, at least the first one was when I was in college, but the second one, he and I were working at NASA when we lost the Columbia crew. And so we take that very, very seriously, and that's what's serious about mission control. And in mission control, back in the Apollo days, there was a mission called Apollo 13, they even made a movie about, that the team in those rooms saved the crew's lives. And so there's a reason for that, and it's still going on today. So that's all the reference there is flight director. And just as a point of reference, I was the 45th flight director ever. Dr. Christopher Columbus Kraft was number 1, and that just means I'm a lot younger than him. But he's still around and kicking, doing a great job. So there's a picture of me as a flight director working, and that's Gene Kranz, that was in the room at the time giving a speech to my team in Mission Control Houston when we were operating the space station. And the other gentleman that's actually in the blue shirt's worth talking about too, his name is Mike Fink. We call him Spanky, because if you ever saw the movie, the TV show Our Gang back in the day, he looks a little bit like Spanky the character, and he loves that we call him that, but we all do. And so Spanky is actually going to be flying on one of the first, now that the space shuttle's been retired, and Steve and others, we had to retire the shuttle in 2011. Now we're getting back commercial capability to fly people in space again, and so he's going to be flying on the first Boeing commercial space vehicle either this year or next year. And so just a sort of a reference back to how we're doing the commercial stuff there, I think is important. And then the other thing I sort of touched on earlier, I think it's important for you guys to know, for NASA, we don't care about politics, and I mentioned this earlier about the Russians and the Americans. That is a Russian gentleman by the name of Igor Tofel that's standing over the console trying to convince me that what they were doing with a spacewalk was okay. And I wasn't buying it at the time, if you can see the look on my face. But we've executed many spacewalks between the two countries. There's 6 people that are in space today, on the space stations. Everybody know that? There's 1 million pounds of hardware in space going above us right now, 17,500 miles an hour, and a lot of them are Russian, and a lot of them are American, and some of them for other countries. So we've been operating very well since the first piece of the space station got put up in 1998, and it's still flying well today, 21 years later. This was just really about Apollo. When I left NASA, and I didn't leave NASA, when I left the flight director office, I went to go work on the moon program, because that's why I started at NASA, I mentioned earlier. And for a while we had a program called Ares and Orion that was going to do this, and it was a program that we executed all the way until 2010, and then it got canceled. But we did do 2 flight tests, one with the launch vehicle we were going to use at the time, and one with the crew capsule as an abort test. And then that was canceled in 2010, and that's why I said back to the moon or maybe not. And then I went to work on Dream Chaser. And so that's the last part I want to talk to you about, and Steve's going to talk a lot about this, but I do want to say a little bit about Dream Chaser. So when I started working here 9 years ago on this vehicle is being built here in Colorado, so that's important for you guys to know, and we're making huge progress with it. It's capable of reusable flight, so it's just like the space shuttle. We can fly it into space and bring it back home onto a runway, just like that picture you see up there. And then we can fly at least 15 times with the same vehicle. And we're going to go into service on this in 2021. So we're going to start flying to the space station in 2021 with a minimum of 6 missions. And Anna, if we can do the ETA test video, I think a picture's worth 1,000 words, or a video's even better than a picture. So just wanted to show you guys, we did a flight test out at Edwards Air Force Base, California, to prove out that the aerodynamics of this vehicle is what they call a lifting body design. If you saw, it's kind of the wingtips are small, but it's got a blunt body that it's actually rejecting all the heat as you're coming back from low Earth orbit. And so this test was done in November 11th, 2017. We actually, no people inside, just to be clear, because the contract I have is to carry cargo to the space station. So that means the vehicle has to take care of itself, all by itself. So our team has designed it to do that. So we carried it in a helicopter up to as high of altitude as the helicopter can actually withstand, which turned out to be 12,500 feet that particular day. And then we're hanging it from a big long tow rope. And then the guys in mission control are checking systems and making sure it's good at the time. And that's the ground team waiting for the vehicle to land on the runway, which is what it's supposed to do. We had an abort system that in case it didn't work right, they would have failed the test so that we didn't hurt anybody on the ground, but it turns out it did great, by the way. So then the team gives the go for release, and there you go. And again, the vehicle's now doing everything on its own. And this is the way it's going to come back from space when we fly in 2021. So you do a big steep dive at the beginning to match the conditions of what it would be like coming back from low Earth orbit, and then we're supposed to hit the runway here. We wanted to make it a little hard on ourselves, so we actually put in some test inputs where we actually kicked it out of the proper orientation a little bit, and you'll see the aero surfaces move really fast. That's on purpose, because we wanted to see and prove that that you just see that, wasn't done on purpose to make sure that it would correct properly and get the right coefficients that we want to give us the confidence in the vehicle flight. And there, sure enough, it lined up exactly the way it is. It's calculating how high it is. It knows when to lower the landing gear based on how high it is above the ground. Gear comes down, the nose comes down, and then we got to land on centerline. And then you're going to see a picture of me stressing out. They're in the middle, wanting it to go well, because obviously it can go very badly. But as you can tell, it landed pretty close to on centerline. We have a ski in front. I won't go into the reasons because I don't have time to explain, but maybe Steve can. I was a little happy. Steve was actually behind me, but I'm blocking his view the whole time. We didn't know there was a camera in that room. So I think hopefully that gives you kind of the concept when we actually do fly this in 2021. We're not going to land at Edwards Air Force Base. We're going to land at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So you're all welcome to come watch that when it happens. Right now it's scheduled for September 2021. Can't wait. And Anna, we can switch to the ConOps video. So that was kind of a design that we had. It's got windows on it that we have. The vehicle's capable of carrying crew or cargo, but the contract we have with NASA is to carry cargo and supplies and science. So we actually took out the windows for the vehicle I'm about to show you here. So this is the one we won the contract for and the one that we're building, and the orbital vehicle's about to be delivered to our office in Louisville, Colorado, to the north side here. But I think it's, again, just a good high-level summary of how we will work when we go into space. We're actually riding on a rocket that's also built and designed here in Colorado by United Launch Alliance called the Atlas V. And so we're going to actually be riding on that rocket when we launch in 2021, again from the Kennedy Space Center. We're going to be launching at Launch Complex 41. The wings of the vehicle have been tucked in underneath the fairing. So this is exactly what it's going to look if you guys come out to the Cape, and I invite everybody to come when we come out to the Cape. So it lifts off from Kennedy Space Center. That's the first stage. The fairing comes off. Now the mission control guys on our team can then send commands to the Dream Chaser after that point. The second stage then inserts us into low Earth orbit, the place we need to go. Once we get into low Earth orbit, then we have to deploy the wings because we tucked them in like this, so now we got to put them out like that to make sure that they can land. So we deploy the wings and then the solar arrays, and the solar arrays are a cool capability that we added. Notice we've got this thing on the back. It's a trailer called a cargo module that actually allows us to carry more stuff. So if you guys have ever gone camping, you have to carry a trailer on the back of your hitch. That's what that thing is doing. We can dock to the space station or berth to the space station, so this first beginning is showing docking missions. To be honest with you, I think we're mostly going to be concentrating on berthing missions to the space station because it's a much bigger hull for the space station, and we can actually get a lot more supplies transferred to and from the space station by berthing. And it'll show you, this is a berthing operation where the station crew grabs our vehicle with the robot arm and then tucks it up against what we call Node 2 Nadir, which is one of the ports there on the space station. And then we move the external cargo. We can carry pressurized cargo or external cargo, meaning unpressurized, and then install it onto the station. So we can actually bring up new stuff or take away the old stuff. Then the cargo module, once you've finished your 80-day mission, it takes out the trash because it's just like a house. So you got to get the trash disposed of. So all the things that they don't need anymore are stored into the cargo module, and then that burns up into the atmosphere. It never makes it back to Earth. It actually burns up. And then the rest of this flight looks just like the next gentleman that's going to tell you all about how this works, Steve Lindsay, who flew this 5 times when he was doing it on shuttle. We landed on the runway, cool for our vehicle, which is different from the shuttle in that you can just get right up to the vehicle right after landing because we don't have any toxic substances or hazards for the crew, so they can actually just walk right up, or in this case, take a van to get the cargo. And I think we can probably cut the video. But hopefully that gives you guys the concept of what you're going to see. We did this really quick, but each of those missions is about 80 days in space that we fly to the space station. We stay up there. While we're mated up there, we actually do science on board, so we're a laboratory in space. We carry mice, for example, up there, and they stay happy and healthy, and Steve can tell you all about that. So I think that's all I have, and I'll hand it over to Steve.
All right. I also did want to mention we are going to have Q&A at the end, so if you want to think of your questions, you'll have a chance to ask everybody. Next up, we have Steve Lindsay, who is a former shuttle astronaut, and also, fun fact, he did the ceremonial pitch at the Rockies game on Wednesday. So his pitch was amazing. The Rockies lost, so I think he might have another career coming his way.
Thank you, Kimberly. Well, it's great to be here, and really what we're talking about today is heritage. We're celebrating Apollo 11. John and I both had the fortune of pretty much knowing all of those astronauts that participated in Apollo, as well as Gemini and Mercury. And what John just showed you about the Dream Chaser is really, if you really trace it all the way back, it's based on, it goes all the way back, it has heritage all the way to Apollo, Gemini, and Mercury. And what I mean by that is, when we started designing Dream Chaser, and John and I were early members of the team back when we only had a few people, one of the things we did is we looked at everything that we'd done in the Space Shuttle program, all of the lessons learned, all the things we did well in the Space Shuttle, all the things we didn't do so well in the Space Shuttle, try to eliminate all the dangerous things, all the hazards in Space Shuttle, but also try to incorporate all the good things in the Space Shuttle and try to learn from that program as we went to the next program. But then if you look at the Space Shuttle goes all the way back to Apollo, and in fact, if you look inside the Space Shuttle, like the control stick that I flew, the control stick is the same basic control stick that they had in the Apollo capsules that they used to fly Apollo. And so a lot of the switchers are heritage. A whole bunch of stuff was ported directly over Apollo into Space Shuttle. Everything done in Apollo was ported from the Gemini program, and that was ported from the Mercury program. So it all has a continuum. I don't want to talk a whole bunch today, but what I want to show you is I want to talk a little bit about the legacy, and what I want to show you is it's a video of my last camping trip into space. And so going into space really is a camping trip. You go up with a crew, you're in a confined space for a space shuttle mission, roughly about 2 weeks long, and you go up and do a mission. And so the mission I want to show you today is, it was my final flight as a space shuttle commander. I was the commander of mission STS-133, and that was on Discovery. And Discovery, we went up to the space station, and we delivered supplies. We did a couple of spacewalks, and we installed a pressurized module called the Permanent Multipurpose Module. And with that module, we completed assembly of the International Space Station. So this occurred in February 2010. It was also the final flight of Discovery. Discovery's the most famous orbiter that we had because it flew the most. It did all the critical flights. It did the Hubble Space Telescope flights. It did the return to flight test missions after both accidents, and again, it flew the greatest number of flights. So I'm going to show a video, and it's really difficult to show a 14-day mission in like 15 minutes, but you'll see in the video, give you a flavor of what we did on the flight. We were a crew of 6. We joined a crew of 6 astronauts, which include Russians, Europeans, and U.S. astronauts that were already on the International Space Station to accomplish this mission. And then we landed back at Kennedy Space Center. So one caveat before we start, in the very beginning of the video, you're going to hear, how many of you remember the original Star Trek? Okay, everybody with gray hair probably remembers this original Star Trek. So in the introduction to Star Trek, if you remember the TV series, it always started with space, the final frontier, these are the voyages, and it was voiced over by William Shatner, who played the Captain Kirk on Star Trek. Well, for the final flight of Discovery, William Shatner actually voiced over the same thing about Discovery and the 39 missions Discovery flew. And so you're going to hear his voice, and in the beginning you're going to see these patches coming forward, and these patches are from all 39 missions, the crew patches that represent all the 39 missions that it flew. So with that, let's go ahead and roll the video and crank the volume up a little bit, please. Thanks.
Of the Space Shuttle Discovery. Her 30-year mission, to seek out new science, to build new outposts, to bring nations together on the final frontier, to boldly go and do what no spacecraft has done before.
the ground. Countdown.
From the processing team of Discovery to the crew of Discovery, enjoy the ride.
Thanks for all the work you did getting this ready to go, and appreciate all your work. And for those watching, get ready to witness the majesty and the power of Discovery as she lifts off one final time.
We have made it to the start. 2, 1. Booster ignition and the final liftoff of Discovery. A tribute to the dedication, hard work, and pride of America's space shuttle team.
He just wants to fly. Woman say it's my turn. Step inside, full burn. Many die in space and time.
Yeah, I'm just looking out the window here, going over the Earth. I'm thinking about how cool it is to be up here doing this, but what's even more impressive to me about the whole spaceflight business is when you have a large team like we have doing something incredibly complex, and yet we pull it off successfully year after year, mission after mission.
She just wants to fly.
One good thing is you can't drop your pencil.
He's obviously a physics major.
Remember why we must fly. Boldness.
Pedal faster, Alvin.
Come on, dude. Go.
Wondering fuels our discovery. We won't surrender. Don't clip our wings.
Okay, we're going to show kind of a flight through. This is starting at the airlock.
Just want to fly. We just want to fly.
This Nicole Stott up there working to pull out the centerline camera.
We just
Commander Steve Lindsay, pilot Eric Bowe, two of the bravest men I know.
We're legends in our own mind.
Legends in their own mind.
we just want to fly.
Hey Steve, Tim, I just wanted to tell you guys you all had an awesome launch, and we're all very proud of you down here.
Great to hear your voice, Tim. I wish you were here because I'd send you on the hunt for the overlay that I'm missing. But anyway, appreciate the good words. It was a great launch. Can't tell you how much we wish you were here with us as well.
Well, I'm sure you know that I feel the same way, but I definitely feel like I'm there in spirit, and I'm especially looking forward to seeing Steve and Al go out the door and do great work.
All right, Discovery, just goes to show you have a 7-person crew. They're just not all up there with you.
Absolutely. Well, in Houston, we have a tally ho on the ISS out the front windows. That thing is a lot bigger since the last time I was here. Discovery Station has you loud and clear on the big loop. What took you guys so long? My call, initiating RPM. 3, 2, 1, mark. Houston, Discovery is initiating final approach. Station and Houston, Discovery has capture confirmed.
Hey, all right. Whoa.
welcome. Hello.
I just wanted to thank Mike for being the voice of ELC4 up here today and let you guys know how much we appreciate your help and that it was really very impressive working from the cupola and watching how these arms work together and getting ELC birth to the truck.
Well, Discovery is a really historic vehicle in a lot of ways. It took its name from a lot of ships of exploration over many centuries, and it comes with a pretty rich heritage, and it's really lived up to that. She just performed magnificently getting us up here, so I think we're all going to be kind of sad to see it go. And we're going to remember Discovery and all the shuttle fleet, I think, is the most capable vehicles that have ever flown in space. So here we have B. Alvin Drew and Steve Bowen, uncharacteristically speechless, and our commander has given them all sorts of words of encouragement and also told them if they do a bad job, he won't let them back in.
Okay, heads open and stowed. Feeling good out there? Just bending and stretching, you know you're gonna wake up sometime. That coffee ought to be kicking in any time now. You see them up there with the camera?
Excellent, you guys. Let Steve finish up the whip extender task and then head back to the airlock, and then we'll be ready for...
And to the whole team there, great work completing a textbook EVA.
B. Alvin Drew, first EVA. What are you going to do now, Al?
I'm gonna have dinner like a quarter horse.
How was it?
That was awesome. Oh man, that was great. That views are outstanding.
And what are you doing today?
Well, today Mike and I are going to move the PMM, which is the big module that's currently in Payload Bay of Discovery, over to the station, and that will complete the assembly of the ISS.
You guys ready? Let's go. Woohoo! Yeehaw!
I hate to ring the recess bell on you, but we only got about 15 minutes left before an extended LOS, and we have Liz here for the transfer brief before hatches close.
off the frame and in my hands.
We're doing really well. They've been following instructions exceptionally well today as I boss them around.
Scott, it was a pleasure to be up here. We appreciate your hospitality. We appreciate you putting up with us, knocking your stuff off the walls, and generally trashing your station. And we're going to miss you guys. And so thanks for everything.
We're going to miss you, but most of all, we're going to miss Discovery. We wish her fair winds and following seas. Thank you.
Discovery departing. We'll miss you guys.
I've taken walks by the rolling sea, where the cliffs drop down to meet the big blue deep. I breathed in the air that rolls over these hills. I breathed it in, but I've had my fill. I gotta roll away. Maybe I'll return to this island someday. Roll away. Maybe I'll
Discovery, you are on energy approaching the hack. Latest winds now 17 peak 25 out of 150, so it's straight down the runway. We ran the energy numbers with the higher peak wind that we gave you earlier, which was the 18 peak 28, still getting you 2,200 feet down. So we'll call it 2,100 at 195.
Okay, copy that. You are flying. Thank you. Good job. All right, 25,000. Bring it on, boys and girls. Roger that. I see one. Okay. I see two. Roger. I see them both. Good. Going into the clouds.
We agree you are on, and we have good HUD video.
Very good. 600, 500, 400. Here's down. Now you're 4230, 2220, 10, 10, 5, 205. Touch. Okay, shoot. Shoot. Derotating. Okay, 1, 2, good rate. There's a shoot. Yep. Those gears now. Yep. Ground speed enabled. All right, backing it up. You're coming to the center line. Now get the shoot on time. Okay. 99. Nice job, Steve. Yeah, that was beautiful. 75. Yeah, the winds are just really... Shoot is coming now. Okay. Coming on the brakes. I felt the shoot. How about that? I have you. I'm easing off. I'm not hardly touching it. Okay. 20 knots. Nice job. That was great.
Oh, I've loved this place, my breath and my bones, and I'll always call this island my home. But I know when the day comes, when my farewell.
And Houston Discovery for the final time. We'll stop.
Discovery, Discovery Houston, Pinto, great job by you and your crew. That was a great landing in tough conditions, and it was an awesome docked mission that you all had. You were able to take Discovery up to a full 365 days of actual time on orbit. I think that you'd call that a fleet leader and a leader of any manned vehicle for time in orbit. So, job well done.
Dan, copy that. Scorch, we're headed to 5-3, and I'd like to thank you and your team and all the orbit teams for a fantastic mission, as well as the Expedition 26 team on orbit. And I'd also like to thank KSC, who has given us a perfect vehicle from start to finish on her final flight.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Steve. And as promised, that video is pretty amazing. And I don't know about you, but it gave me chills. And I'm not one for Colorado camping, but space camping could definitely be something that I could get behind. So thanks, Steve, for sharing that with us. That was very special to see all those moments. Next up, we have Jeff Valania, who's part of our advanced development team. He's kind of a space architect, so he basically comes up with the system designs for our concepts for moon missions and also deep space exploration, like a mission to Mars. So Jeff's going to talk about what we're doing to work with NASA and the vision and future of space, and including all that legacy from the shuttle program and Apollo and what that means now and where we're going next.
Okay, thanks for Kimberly for making that sound cool, not geeky. I appreciate that. So, I'd like to start first with a little audience participation, if that's okay with you. Who out there, so we're celebrating Apollo, right? Who out there is excited about the next crewed mission to the moon? Excitement? Yes. All right, now be honest. Who just wants to go to Mars? Anyone? Okay, a couple. Those are both really cool missions. Both missions we're excited about and things we're thinking about and talking about in the advanced development group. So obviously SNC has a lot of interest in space. As John had talked about, Dream Chaser is sort of the foundation for many things that we're looking at beyond low Earth orbit. Their sole focus is get to the space station, deliver cargo, but what our group is doing is we're looking at how we can apply those technologies that we're developing and all those lessons learned to other opportunities to explore to the moon and beyond. And so our group has some contracts with NASA already. One of those is looking at this lunar space station. We call it the Lunar Gateway. You can sort of think of it like, it's like the convenience store that's close to the moon. It's close to your final destination. You get there, you fuel up, you get some of your supplies, maybe you pick up some candy bars. I don't know, Steve, do you get good candy bars in space, Steve? Maybe not good candy bars. But once you get all your supplies there, then that's where the crew will head down to the surface with the landers. We're also studying these concepts for reusable lunar landers, something that's sustainable that can create a sustained presence on the surface. And our teams are also looking at how do you make use of the resources at the surface as well. We know that there's water on this close to the surface of the moon. We know that that's been found at the South Pole there, and there will be missions that will explore those areas, and that water could be used for the crew. That water can actually be turned into propellants for some future vehicles to make use of, and even the soil itself can be used as structure. So there are many ways to make use of the resources once you're there to create a sustained presence around the moon. Okay, so I mentioned we're studying this Lunar Gateway. The Lunar Gateway is really the foundation for demonstrating the technologies. It's where you can demonstrate the technologies you need for these lunar missions, but also for the deep space concepts. And it's a good place. It's in a good orbit that's relatively close to Earth. It takes a few days to get there, as opposed to going out to Mars, where you're talking about months. So in the event that anything goes wrong, there are opportunities for the crew to get safely back to the Earth. So it's in a really good place, and it's a good opportunity to explore the systems that are needed for those long duration missions. Now, as we've been going through these studies, we've been looking at the Lunar Gateway for probably about 2 years now with NASA, and developing architecture concepts, but also developing a prototype on the ground. We sort of had these key principles or tenets that we adhere to in our design. And one of those is that this be as flexible as possible. we need the concept to be able to evolve and adapt as the missions that NASA is considering might change. So reconfiguring it, being able to operate in space with and without crew is a really important thing as well. Crew will spend some amount of time at the gateway, and then they'll either go to the lunar surface or depart back for the Earth. So it's important that this system can operate autonomously as well. We also felt that it was necessary to be able to launch all of these elements in as flexible a way as possible and cost effectively. And so we've been considering how do you get each of the elements launched either on NASA's SLS or commercially on some of the commercial rockets that are available today. And so we've designed a system, even our large habitat, that inflates in space and can be stowed and launched and packaged efficiently and launch really on any of these commercial rockets. We also talked about slowly building up and evolving the systems for this gateway. So things like the crew life support systems, those evolve and grow as you add modules in space. And then finally, we wanted to make sure we developed a full-scale prototype of this so we can demonstrate on the ground and make sure this is the right system for the moon, but also, as I said, the right system for these long-duration missions. And some of the technologies, including this large habitat, as well as the large power systems, those actually make sense for something like a deep space transport vehicle that would take crew to Mars on a long-duration mission. So Anna, if you could cue up the Gateway video, I'd like to show you a video here which explains some of these elements in a little bit more detail. What you'll see first in this video is we have an architecture here that we're imagining, which is actually a little different than what you saw in the picture. And again, we're looking at this system to be able to adapt and be configurable in different ways. So this vision for the Gateway includes actually 4 elements. There are 3 unique platforms in this Gateway concept that we've envisioned. The first of those that launches first is sort of the brains and the brawn of the space station. We call it the power and propulsion element. And we actually envision 2 of those in our architecture. Then we also have the large inflatable fabric environment, the Life, pretty cool name for where you're going to live and spend most of your time performing your science and in the habitat. And then finally, the ELCM is a multi-purpose kind of do-it-all element for us, where crew can perform extra vehicle activities and that can also deliver cargo up to the Gateway. So a little more on the power and propulsion element. The power and propulsion element is demonstrating some really interesting, innovative technologies, like I said, that are going to be very useful for the long-duration missions. What you can see there is a large solar array. We use that power to power the space station, the entire space station. That power is also used for the solar electric propulsion, and that's a very efficient propulsion system where we're using the sun's energy to actually reduce the amount of propellants that are used to keep the Gateway in orbit. The next thing is the Life. As I had mentioned, this is a soft goods habitat. So it's stowed at launch and it deploys on orbit, and its diameter is 27 feet when deployed. The space in here is almost like a typical 2-story house. So a lot of room to build up the cargo you need again, demonstrate all of the systems that would be needed for both the lunar missions as well as the Mars missions. The unique benefits of these soft goods, in addition to allowing us to inflate to a much larger volume on orbit, they also provide very good radiation protection for the crew, again, which is very important. And then finally, the extended logistics and control module. In our architecture, what we envisioned is a derivative of our cargo module from Dream Chaser. This is what John had mentioned, is taking extra cargo to the space station with Dream Chaser. We've extended that to provide additional cargo capabilities. We put ports on the side, and those ports allow you, again, to reconfigure and build up this architecture of the Gateway. And then finally, as we've envisioned this has 2 chambers, so you can actually perform an EVA within and outside of this ELCM. Okay, so if you move to, sorry, I could do that. So a little bit more on the life. I talked about this being inflated. It also has a rigid core where you can store the systems you need to deploy those once on orbit. It provides all of the systems the crew needs. You can store everything in this habitat once we build up the gateway. So really versatile. And then again, as I had said, it's very large, fits a crew of 4, and can support them for up to an 1,100-day mission for Mars. I'd like to just show one more video. It's the inflation video, if you could. So I mentioned we developed a prototype. That prototype is in our facilities in Louisville. And what we wanted to do here is make sure that we had a full-scale system to be able to demonstrate how to live and work and operate in this. We actually put a crew of 2 in over a weekend, and they walked through the procedures that you would walk through in the typical day in the life when you're at the gateway. Here you can see a sped up version of this. It took about 20 minutes or so to inflate the first time, 10 minutes after that. But this is that soft goods technology, and once expanded, we then actually build up floors in the inside of this and outfitted the interior for people to spend some time there. Once we completed testing, the habitat actually got shipped to Johnson Space Center, and that's where it is right now. So the hope is the next step for our habitat is actually in space in the moon. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff.